All right. Hello and good afternoon. Welcome. Happy New Year to you, and welcome back to TRS, the relationship series. I'm going to give about 25 seconds just to make sure everybody that wants to be on time can join in and be here on time. And then we're going to jump in. But good to see you. Who's in the room today? Shakes, is that you? What's good? See Anne Marie. All right. Hello. All right, let me start this real quick. All right, I think that's all I'm doing. Thank you guys for being on time. I appreciate that. All right. So, hello and welcome to the Relationships Series. Happy Black History Month, depending on where you are in the world and whether or not you see the glass as half full. I know a lot of people have issues with the shortest month of the year being Black History Month, but happy Black History Month nonetheless. It is always great to be with you guys. My favorite day is Thursdays. And here at TRS, we have transformational conversations that help us to have better relationships. I always like to say we have three pillars. We do the work. So we do the work of relationships. We heal for real. So we make sure we're ready and prepared to be in relationships in the way that we want to be. And we sow the things in relationships, so the behaviors, the attitudes, and so on, that we want to grow out of our relationships. And so I love to make sure that I say that every time. Hey. What's good? Thank you so much for using the chat. I appreciate you guys. Just interacting and engaging. So make sure you guys do that throughout. It is a conversation. I am Genevieve, for those of you who may not know. I am your friendly neighborhood sister girl with the sister locks. And I'm a passionate person on the hot topic of relationships as well as mental health. Little bit about me. I am a therapist, I'm a speaker, I'm a coach, and a fellow journeyer, really. And I enjoy this. I enjoy having conversations that are important. The vision I have for the relationship series is to share with people how to pursue connection over currency. So, how to pursue quality relationships over money or material things as a main source of value, fulfillment, and joy in our lives. And so that's the vision. We are in season number 6. Woohoo, right? And last season we had a great season. We were reviewing some books. This season is our identity season. So we'll be discussing the important role of meaning and identity in cultivating revolutionary relationships. Okay, so one of the things that I think will be special about this season is I just came back from Ghana. And so we'll be using principles from the Adinkra symbols as we explore our theme of identity and meaning. And so I'm wearing this fancy kente cloth that has been stamped with some of the Adinkra symbols that are meaningful for me and that will be going through this season. Um, so today, who's that? Who's that? Hi. Oh, hi, Mom. Hey, who do I have? Oh, Avalon. Hey, y'all. How y'all doing? Welcome. Good to see you. Happy New Year, if I haven't said it already, or if I haven't. Hey, who's there? Ethiopia. Hey, how y'all doing? Woo.
Hey, good. How you doing?
Fantastic. Thank you. Um,
Good.
so today I've entitled our conversation, Say My Name. And I really wanted to qualify this. Okay, so our names, um, they I'll say our names and our history, they shape our identity. They help us to form and derive meaning, and they also impact our mental health. So I'll say it again. Our names and our history shape our identity. They help us to derive meaning, and they impact our mental health. So who we are, where we come from, impacts our perspectives, not just our potential, or not our potential, really, but it impacts how we see things in the world. And so I really want us to focus on that as sort of a frame for our conversation today. So again, you guys, I'm interruptible, so you can you can say what you will, post in the chat, uh, turn on your microphones and all that good stuff. We always have an agenda. Our agenda is very similar to in the past. We'll look at some definitions, again, just to ground us so that we're all somewhat on the same level, using the same terms generally in terms of our comprehension. So we'll look at some definitions. We'll look at some SAQs. SAQs are what I've termed self-awareness questions. So self-awareness questions help to look in.
So even though I'm having a towel, do you still want me to come a little earlier on that day?
Avalon, I'm going to mute you. That's
So I can speak to that too.
I'm
So
getting,
customer I have is up. She's cool. Okay, so should I do like it was 1:30, so are you thinking like 1:15 or even earlier than that or like
there we go. Um, so uh, I want to make sure that we are asking ourselves questions throughout the conversation. That is to help us to reflect and to connect and engage with what we're talking about, with the topic, so that it goes a little bit deeper than just surface or cognitive knowledge. Okay, so where we're at is part of self-awareness. We will look at the benefits and pitfalls. So some of the things that come up that can help us, and some of the things that come up that can hinder us when we don't have a good sense of or good, strong foundation in meaning and identity. And then, of course, when we do. So we'll look at the benefits and pitfalls, and then we'll look at our Adinkra symbol for the day, which I'm super excited about. And then we'll unpack how names factor into this equation. So again, I'm interruptible, especially today. It's Black History Month, y'all, inclusivity or, diversity, equity, inclusion, so everybody can say something. But yes, we want to have a conversation. I'm going to mute somebody else because I hear feedback on somebody else's microphone. Who is that? Okay. Becky, what's up? Joining us from Belize. Welcome, welcome. Holler. Good to see you. Okay, so our definition today, we're going to look at identity. Identity is a set of qualities, beliefs, traits, and or expressions that characterize a person or a group. Identity emerges during childhood as children start to comprehend their self-concept, and it remains a consistent aspect throughout different stages of life. Okay, so identity is something that travels with us. So it's established at some point in time when we're able to understand a little bit about who we are, internalize some of the messages. You're a good boy when, or you're a good girl when, or bad boys do this, or good girl, bad girls do this, right? So we start to form some of those ideas, those qualities, those beliefs early on in our lives. And then it travels with us. Yes, it can become it can change and it can evolve as we go, but identity and the self concept that we establish remains consistent, right? So we have a sense of self consistently throughout the different stages of our lives, and that shifts and changes as we change roles, right? We might get a position, we might study a particular area. Like, I don't know, ethics, or we might study political science, we might study a language, French or something like that. And so our sense of identity changes as we connect back to different tribes or groups. And throughout our stages of life, our roles might change. So we might become a parent, we might become a spouse, something like that. So those things will add to and help to evolve our sense of self, our sense of identity. So the fact is that we are a being, and we have an identity. Okay. So this is for us, just to get us thinking, get our minds kind of flowing. Um, who are you? That's a question that I think we are asked and that we ask ourselves. right? And so I want to ask, who are you? And just for you to think about it, right? How you introduce yourself, how you answer this question, right? Do you answer the same way internally as you answer externally? So when you say, hey, you look in the mirror and you say, yeah, who are you? I look in the mirror and I say, Genevieve, who are you? And inside of myself, in my own mind, I answer this question. Well, I'm I- I'm I'm a therapist, I'm a coach, I'm a speaker, but like who are you? Okay, I'm a daughter, I have some godkids, I'm a godmother, but like who are you? What's the essence of who you are? And I start to think about that. What kind of purpose do I have? What kind of sense of meaning do I have in my life? What kind of sense of fulfillment do I have in my life? What do I believe? What are some of the characteristics that I have? I'm a bold person, I'm a confident person, I'm a gentle person, I'm a tender person. I'm an open person. I'm a wise person. Like, who am I? And I start to go through the answers on the inside. But if somebody else asked me, who are you? I would probably come up with, a very different answer than the one I would give myself internally. I may not go into all the layers and sort of the deeper things about who I consider myself to be. And I may not even touch on, I would likely not touch on the things that are somewhat troublesome or disruptive about who I believe myself to be. And so sometimes we wrestle with ideas or beliefs about ourselves that we would never share, but we still hold them and they still influence our external expressions. They still influence how we show up in spaces, how we show up in the world. We might show up and our backs are straight, our heads are up, our shoulders are back, and so on. But internally, we're like, oh my goodness, like I don't know what I don't want to say anything stupid. I don't want anybody to think I'm dumb. I don't, and so we stay silent. So I might consider myself to be a shy person on the inside, right? So this reflection is helpful for us, just to get a sense of perhaps the gap between what we think of ourselves and what we hope to or attempt to portray toward others as we answer this question, right? And then I want to ask about this question as you think about it. And you guys can throw your mics on and chat with me, or chat in the chat. Um, but thinking about like where this information came from that you use to answer this question, right? Where did you get the information or the script, the ideas about who you are? And what has been some of the most prevalent messaging that you have held on to regarding who you believe yourself to be? I love when I ask someone, hey, like tell me about yourself, right? Because then they start the spiel or the elevator pitch or what have you. And then I'm like, okay, so like really, like, tell me about yourself, right? Because we throw out the things that are most important to us or that we believe others will value most about us, right? So it's really cool to sometimes reflect on what we say about who we are. So maybe thinking about how you introduce yourself. Are you satisfied with who you are? So this is an internal question, right? Are you satisfied with who you believe yourself or know yourself to be? And is that maybe in part, or is that on a whole? Is that in all aspects? Are there areas that you are looking to transform, to change, to improve, to grow in, or what have you? Um, but I guess maybe the extension of the question would be, who are you? And then who are you who you want to be? Ooh, yeah, both ways, externally and internally. Um, and then if you're not, then who do you want to be? Right? So just asking the question, all of this has to do with, I see a chat entry. Let me see. Um, yeah. So yeah, as Samuel, answering the question, my interpretation of my own lived experience, words from others, or words others have used to describe me. So yeah, so hearing from others, and then as you've grown, developing an interpretation of your own lived experience. And so making meaning of the things that you've done or the things that you've been through, and coming up with more of a sense of who you are, or a fuller answer of who you are, or fuller understanding of who you are based on some of those experiences. So, uh, I want to also sort of track this back to our conversation today about names, right? So our title is Say My Name. And when you think of your name, and I don't know if many of you, maybe not, maybe you have looked up what your name means. And I want to know if you add that piece into this answer that you come up with about who you are. Do you add your name and what your name means into this question? And maybe what does your name mean? I don't know if you guys know what your name means, throw it in the chat or throw your mic on and let me know what your name means. And you can, yeah, maybe I would really, I'm just really curious about anybody that has looked up their name. And some of you might be going to Google right now, like, I don't know what my name means. Maybe I should Google it right now. What's my name mean? Um, but I think it's really cool to think about uh, what your name means and how that factors into your identity, who you are, your sense of self. Simone, what's up, girl? Hey. One who is heard. Simone, one who is heard. Oh, that's beautiful. And so maybe, yeah, maybe that's a question for you or a reflection for you. Um, does that factor into your voice, your sense of who you are as a person who is heard, right? And so your voice is a strong one. Your voice is a one that you use to advocate for others, maybe in social justice spaces. Um, like how does that sort of factor into your identity and your person? Jermaine, my name means brother. Does it? I didn't know that. Oh man. And you're such a brother, Jermaine. Oh, that's great. Um, so yes, there you go. So part of I would describe you as a brother. So this is external scripting here. Um, okay. So yes, I think in some ways, and I have my names on here somewhere in these slides, so we'll talk about that in a minute. And you guys can give me feedback because some of you actually know me, and you guys can tell me if I've embodied my name meanings, because of course most of us have more than one name. We're not back in the 19 was it like the 1930s or something where like they only had one name. It was like, my name is Plato, my name is Descartes, like one name. But we usually have more than one name. We usually have a first name and a last name. And some of us have middle names. I have many names. Um, but yeah, so just asking ourselves some of those questions about who we are and our sort of sense of self and how strongly we are convicted in some of the things that we say, some of the things that we believe about ourselves. So we'll talk about some of these benefits and pitfalls. We'll review them briefly, but in relationships, meaning and identity really do play a crucial role. And again, it shapes how we build our connections, right? It shapes how we interact and how we enjoy one another or how we find fulfillment, right? So when we have a strong sense of who we are, of self, and we are convicted and confident in that, it changes the way that we show up, that we live life, that we are in the world. And so I've just noted a few things here that I think would be interesting for us to evaluate and reflect on in our own lives, right? So based on some of these pillars, what is the level of strength or veracity in our sense of self, right? In our sense of meaning and identity, right? Our groundedness. So I noted here, authentic connections is usually a good indicator, a good indicator of a strong sense of self and identity and meaning. Okay. So when we have authentic connections, when we're able to, let's give some examples, maybe like um, express like gratitude and appreciation for one another, like noticing and acknowledging greatness, goodness in other people. I think when it comes to authentic connections, I think um, one of the easiest and quickest ways to build authentic connection is like through compliments and gifts. I think those are probably the fastest. Like when a new neighbor moves into the neighborhood, like when I moved into a new neighborhood, my neighbor, she heard me come home one night and she came the next day with a bottle of wine. I don't even really drink wine like that, but she came with a bottle of wine. She's like, "Hey, I heard that somebody moved in over here. I brought you a bottle of wine. Let's be friends." Right? But that was like instant connection. She didn't have to do that. She could have just continued to live in her house and be her own person. But she fostered that connection by bringing a bottle of wine, by coming over, and by making herself known and connecting, and showing that she valued connection and that she was interested in doing that with me, right? So I think like a gift, a gesture, a compliment, a genuine one, right? We're talking about genuine behavior here. I think that um, I think that really does reflect on our groundedness and a good sense of self. Um, I see. Hold on. Okay, sorry about that, guys. So yeah, I think that's a good reflection. Connection is definitely an outcome, an outcome, a positive one, a benefit. Healthy boundaries. We talk a lot about boundaries. A lot of books have been written about boundaries, boundaries with kids, boundaries with parents, boundaries with spouses, boundaries in marriage, boundaries in everything, boundaries. I think boundaries are certainly very important, but I also think they are definitely a benefit and a indicator, a strong indicator that we have a strong sense of self and identity and meaning. So healthy boundaries can look like um, saying no. That's a good one. Being able to say no when things don't align with our our values, or when we are overextended, or when saying yes might end up costing us or harming us in some way. Okay, so saying no, I think, is a good boundary line. Um, and especially, I've been having conversations recently just about like dating and this whole, sort of space of like online relationships and so on. And sexuality is a very big and precarious thing now. And a lot of people are finding the lines being blurred and people crossing over their boundaries, sexually speaking. And I think like when it comes to healthy boundaries, being able to say, "Hey, this is where I stop, where I end, what I stand for," is so important on the outset, right? So when you say, "Okay, I'm gonna save myself until marriage," or something like that, like I think stating that clearly sets other people. Clarity is kindness. Okay, sets other people up for success in your life and in the relationship that you're co-creating with them. But it also sets you up, right? So from the outset, it's not wishy-washy. It's not like fluid. It's not like, okay, maybe I'll kind of, see where this goes. Well, I don't want them to leave me, or I don't want to lose them, or I don't want them to hate me or not like me, or da da da, whatever, whatever. So I'll kind of not say what I really value, what I really want, what I really believe, what I really need. But I think when you have a strong sense of who you are, and your identity, that you can state those things that you stand for and that you believe, right? They say if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything, right? So healthy boundaries is definitely an indicator. Um, Sense of like, what can I say this? Like a sense of fulfillment. So fulfillment is a weird word because it's so different for everybody. But I think when I think of fulfillment, I think of like, I know who I am. I know where I'm going. I know what I'm about. I have a sense of like purpose in my life, and I don't feel like I'm missing anything or like I need anything. Everything that comes is a bonus, and I'm grateful for it. So that's a sense of fulfillment. It's not like I'm grasping, grabbing, huffing and puffing, struggling and hustling and grinding and trying and like, oh my God, I need to fill a void on the inside. Self-actualizing and growing, very different from, oh my goodness, I need something to help me feel like I'm worth it, help me feel like I'm deserving of life, help me feel, like I'm valuable, right? So fulfillment, I think, really is the opposite of that kind of space. And it's thriving and growing and reaching uh, because you can, right? Because you have the opportunity to do that. So I think that sense um, uh, of fulfillment can come from relationships if we have a strong sense of self, so that we're not pulling from the relationship in order for us to feel like we are valued in some way, right? And the reality is relationships are going to do that regardless. Relationships are going to give us ideas and thoughts about how we are and who we are. And at times they'll make us feel good and not make us feel good. They'll hurt us and all that kind of stuff. There will be those kinds of things. But as long as we within ourselves are not looking to relationships to find fulfillment, right? We are looking to relationships to experience our lives, to experience ourselves, and we're entering into those relationships with while already having established a strong sense of who we are, our values, how we want to show up. I'm going to go show up in a relationship. I'm not going to match your energy. I'm bringing my energy and I'm sticking with it. That's it. I'm not matching your energy, right? And so that's a strong, I think some of us have a stronger sense of self. People will probably describe me as having a strong personality. Um, and so I can be moved, but I'm not easily moved. And so, I can be convinced for sure. I can be persuaded. And I fall victim to temptation and all that kind of stuff. I'm easily susceptible, just like any other human being. But I think that I show up with something already in place. And so it would be very difficult to move past that place, or that line that I've drawn. So I think relationships, yes, contribute significantly to our overall life satisfaction and personal identity development, but I think a sense of fulfillment we can experience having, or we can establish before we get into the experience of relationship. And then the last one there is direction. I think I think having a sense of direction is a very clear indicator of a strong sense of self. Like we know where we're going, and we can't be deterred, right? So Samuel's on here today. I do a podcast with my ex-husband. I think that's a really good example um, of a sense of direction, because we both share this like passion for healing, growth, and so on. And especially after having been divorced, for divorced people, and for, of course, married people who don't want to get divorced, and single people, of course, who want to get married and don't want to get divorced, right? And so we have a value for marriage. I think we have a same sense of like direction, but that's pretty much it, right? So we have that sort of project happening. But when it comes to other parts of our lives, when it comes to the other things that are going on, we're very, very, separate and apart, right? So we use our skills to create that positive impact, but we have no other areas of crossover, and we maintain our individuality in our separate lives. And I think that is somewhat of a good idea, or a good example of when we show up in relationships, right? Have something of your own that's yours, that you're bringing. But also you can establish, sort of mutual direction, but that ought not to take away from who you are and the rest of your life. It ought not to take over your life. So having a strong sense of self can really protect you or safeguard you against like codependency, and we'll talk about this in 1 second, because I'm going to look at the pitfalls. But some of the pitfalls that can come about, especially in the context of relationships. So a well-established personal identity and sense of meaning acts as a strong foundation for healthy relationship in all of these areas. Okay, so it helps us to know, express ourselves better, and be authentic in our expression. It helps us to communicate clearly and set boundaries clearly. Clarity is kindness. It helps us to communicate confidently and effectively, right? And so we are sure about how we're going to show up. We're not matching energy. We're showing up with our values, strictly in place. And if we have a value for speaking with people, not swearing or whatever. That's what we do, regardless of how people come at us. And when it comes to um, direction, it helps us to face and navigate, the challenges with greater resilience. So I think those are some of the things that we can look for within ourselves in our own lives, and maybe just gauge, like think about your own life right now and think about like yourself in relationships. You're like, oh, do I have a strong sense of self? Do I set boundaries? Do I feel fulfilled? Am I looking for validation? Am I looking, to be approved of by other people? Am I people pleasing? Am I wishy-washy? Am I double-minded? Am I all these things? And that might be an indicator that perhaps your sense of identity and sense of self is not as strong as you would like it to be for the kinds of relationship or kind of relationship that you would like to establish. Um, so some pitfalls. So basically, when we lack a strong sense of self, we see these things show up in our relationship. So we have inner conflict, right? So we start acting in ways or treating others in ways that don't align with our internal desires, or our judgments of what is good and what is acceptable, right? So I've hit rock bottom a couple of times, and when I say rock bottom, it's when I do something or act in a way or treat someone in a way that is like so opposite to how I want to treat them or behave or act. So when I look in the mirror, I see I see like the huge gap between who I want to be and who I am, or who I demonstrated myself to be in that moment. Right. So that's what I consider rock bottom, because there's such a bifurcation, there's such an incongruence, there's such a misalignment, right, between my stated values and my actual values. And that feels uncomfortable. It actually feels painful on the inside of me. And it's broken me down like to tears. And I'm like, this is the kind I value, and I've said this a few times in the past, but I value relationships, I value marriage, I value covenant, right? And I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to be a wife coach, not a life coach, a wife coach, because I was like, married. I want people to be married and stay married and so on. I was raised. My parents went through a divorce. Like there's pain there, and I was like, I want people to figure out how to stay in marriage. And so I have a strong value for, not when I was a kid, when I was a young adult, not when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I didn't even want to get married. But I have a strong value for covenant, for marriage, and for the idea of staying together and so on and working it out. And so I remember when I was going through a divorce, when I separated from my husband, at the time, I started dating before I actually signed the papers. So I was in a whole relationship and married, not on paper. Okay, fine, right? But in my mind, that was it was such a like a hypocritical sort of move. Unhealthy, yes. I mean, unhelpful, yes. For recovery, all those things when it comes to revolutionary relationship. But internally, internally, when it came to assessing my values, there was so much distance, and that hurt me, right? So I think when we look at having a strong sense of self, or not having a strong sense of self. And granted, when we go through a breakup, we go through a divorce. When I went through a divorce, my sense of self was shattered. It was crumbled, and obviously, I did a lot of things that weren't in alignment that caused me inner conflict. So I think when there's inner conflict, it's time to really like turn back and reestablish your sense of self. Like, wait a minute, who am I? What do I stand for? What do I do and not do? What are my values? What are my priorities? And so on, right? Another thing that shows up, I think exhaustion shows up. Exhaustion is like fatigue. So I've had seasons in my life where I have just been faking it till I'm making it, fake it till you make it type of thing. And been very inauthentic, um, non-vulnerable, not very open, just not very real. So I showed up for y'all. I showed up for everybody outside of me, right? Who do people expect me to be? Who do people want me to be? Who have people known me to be? Let me just continue to do that and be that until I figure out all the stuff that's going on the inside of me that feels like broken, that feels irreparable, like that just feels gross. Let me just try to show up as who I've always been. And that gets exhausting. It's tiring. When we have some of those like unresolved personal issues and um internal like what would I call that? Like when we can't show up as our real selves, right? So I think that's exhausting. Um, I think I think it also sometimes can lead to like over investing in our relationships and in other people. I think when we don't have like a strong sense of self, we look like to the outside, like, oh, how are you doing? What's going on with you? And we never talk about ourselves because like we don't know ourselves and we don't really value ourselves that much. And so and I've done this. I make a lot of space for people. And I've done it in the past. I do it now, obviously, because I work as a therapist and so on. And so I can do for myself the things I need to do and care for myself while I also give space. But I think in the past, it's come from a very different place. It's come from a place of just not knowing or valuing myself or really believing that I'm worthy of taking up space that I also give. And so I would listen a lot and take in a lot and ask a lot of questions, so on. And so leaning in that way is also somewhat of an indicator, right? So you give a lot of space, but you don't also take space. And I think there's a mutual respect that comes when people have a strong sense of self, right? Because you're both invested in co-creating that relationship, and you both value the relationship, and you both want to get a return on that investment from the relationship. So that loss of self can be a part of that as that, sorry, the loss of self can be a part of that. It can look like that as well. Um, misaligned values, I think it speaks for itself. Significant differences in core values can certainly create conflict and undermine our growth and our levels of like satisfaction in relationships. Can certainly affect our feelings of closeness in relationships, our feelings of connection in the relationship. Um, I think when people think of misaligned values, we think of like religious beliefs or political affiliation. Sometimes we think about um like where we want to live or financial status. Like you want to live as a monk in the mountains of China, and I want to live as like a conglomerate CEO in Manhattan, New York, right? So those are different values, right? Value for like peace and tranquility and inner whatever. Value for prosperity or maybe external riches or influence or power or access to resources, right? So those two desires in terms of lifestyle come from two different sets of values, right? So misaligned values can also be a product of not having like a strong sense of self in relationship. Um, it can show up when we accept and adopt other people's values in in spite of our own, right? And so we allow other people's ideas and thoughts and whatever to encroach upon our own, even though we know they're there, but we're not confident in expressing them or sharing them with others. So misaligned values can be an indicator that perhaps um, you may not have a strong sense of self. And so just again, this is not for blame or for self-loathing or anything like that. This is for awareness. This is for us to become more aware of what is actually going on for us in our lives. So those are some of the things: inner conflict, loss of self, exhaustion, misaligned values. Again, cultivating a strong sense of self and really actively exploring um, shared meaning within a relationship is really crucial for building healthy, fulfilling connections where people thrive. Right. So we've gone through some benefits, we've gone through some pitfalls, and now we get to our Adinkra symbol. So we're grounding our talk here today in this symbol. This symbol is called Sankofa. And so my good friend gifted me this book while we were in Ghana. And It is a book that outlines some of the Adinkra symbols and their meanings. And I love it. I just, it's so profound. So when I visited Ghana last month, I was struck by the fact that everything had meaning. And I'm talking long-standing historical ancestral meaning. Names had meaning. So I'm wearing this bracelet. It says, I don't know if you guys can see that. It says Ama. Ama means born on a Saturday. So I was born on a Saturday. And so everybody that's born on a Saturday gets a name, female, male, born on a Monday, Tuesday, all that kind of stuff. So the names are indicative of where you're born, how you're born, and then they also have other names, traditional names that come from like characteristics that they want that person to embody, a lineage or family bloodline that they've come from, a position or a title. Perhaps they are a chief or some kind of royal entity. And then they also look at names that are associated with ancestors. So perhaps they had a great great grandmother who, was very like I don't know, strong or very insightful or wise. And so they name that person after that grandmother because they want to embody, they want that child to embody the spirit or the essence of that person. So the names have meaning, the places have meaning, all all of the buildings, all of the regions have meaning. The food has meaning. Everything has meaning, right? We got to eat all the foods, and I'm originally from my dad's from Nigeria, and so I debated with everybody about jollof rice because there's a whole debate that's been, I don't know, from the beginning of time between Ghana jollof and Niger jollof. Um, but everything has meaning, and everyone is well informed about the meanings of things um, growing up. So they know, like it's instilled in the children and in the school system, in the family system, in the religious system, all in the political system, in the social system. It's all infused in there. Everyone knows what everything means, right? And they internalize and embody these meanings with pride, right? And that goes back to um that sense of identity and sense of self. Like I know who I am. I know where I'm from. I know what I'm about. Like and I'm proud of that, right? Everything around me informs me of that and reinforces that, right? And I learned that these Adinkra symbols were originally designed by the Ashanti craftsmen, and they embody and convey these like nonverbal traditions or like values or we might see them as like proverbs. And the designs are like they're stamped on and woven into clothing, and they have that deep historical and philosophical like meaning. So I got to stamp my scarf using this dye, and it's not a scarf; it's kente cloth, but it's a scarf. Um, and the dye comes from like the tree bark that comes from this one tree, like in the northern region or something. Like everything, everything just is so profound, and I just love that everything has a story, everything has an identity. And so I got to do that, and I really left with a deeper sense of um, like self and stronger resolve to uphold and honor just like my heritage as an African woman. Um, and so I thought it would be cool to share the Adinkra symbols and to simultaneously use them to help us along our journey and of discovery towards like the clearer identity and meaning of ourselves and our lives and our relationships. So there'll be like a frame or like a lens that we use as we sort of ground and guide our conversations this season. So our first symbol is Sankofa. It is translated as the wisdom of learning from the past to build for the future. So I think the actual term is positive reversion. So wisdom of learning from the past to build a future, to build for the future. And I hope I do not butcher this. My Ghanaians, when you watch this, please comment. Um, uh, I'm going to try and say the phrase. Se wo wirefi na wo sankofa a gentry. I hope I didn't butcher that. Y'all Ghanaians can let me know. But I love the phrase. I memorized it, guys, because I wanted to say it right. Se wo rirefi na wo Sankofa a yentri. It is not wrong to go back for that which we have forgotten or left behind. That is the actual translation. It is not wrong to go back for that which we have forgotten or left behind. I see a chat. Did I butcher it? I hope I didn't butcher it. Is that Tree you're speaking? Yes, it's Tree. Okay, so I'm gonna send that to my Ghanaian folks, and y'all can tell me. But yes, so we know, and we've probably heard it before that if we don't know or respect our history or our past, then we're liable to repeat like the mistakes of our past, right? And so as we look back, our topic being say my name, we're connecting this, we're linking Sankofa to names because it represents the concept of going back and getting or retrieving our heritage, which can be like interpreted as looking back to our like roots, our ancestral roots, to understand our identity. And often that includes researching names, right? Our names are like, they're a link of some sort. They're recorded in history and legal documents, right? And so even when people go back to look in ancestry and look in their heritage or whatever, they try to track names. They track first names and last names, in documents, slave documents and whatever, and trying to figure out who they are, right? Connecting back to their lineage to the past generations. So essentially using our name as a starting point is to explore like our family, our identity, and we're doing that looking back, right? So looking to the past to build for the future, right? So we're connecting our names to that, this sort of search about our names. So Say My Name is not just a Destiny Child song. I know most people are like, say my name when no one anyway. So it's not just a Beyonce or Destiny Child song. But it is a phrase that indicates this sense of like force and longing, right? There's like historical impact here when we talk about names because it talks about where we've been. And we are in Black History Month, and so we're talking about these symbols that have meaning for me as I journey and reconnect with my heritage and so on. But colonization or colonialism and the erasure of our names by renaming African people um, resulted in a loss and a dilution, like a diluting of our identities. That's just the truth, right? So I think it's become really important for our survival and for our uh, resistance, even like when it comes to like the resistance movement. It's important for us to preserve our names through oral traditions, through reclamation, and many people have done reclaiming of names. In the past, Malcolm X is one of them. Most recently, Umar Johnson, he received Ghanaian citizenship when we were there, and received a Ghanaian name. I have a Nigerian name, obviously, but when I was in Ghana, they did this cool naming ceremony where they offered me Ghanaian names, and so one of them is Ama. But there is a history of our existence pre-slavery. And I think reconnecting with that means that we understand ourselves differently, see ourselves differently, and then present ourselves differently in the world. Because our story, a lot of the times when we are in the West, starts at, oh, transatlantic slave trade. Well, they came from Africa and they're slaves. But then what happened before, right? There's a whole existence, a whole life that was present before that. And I think names have really deep meaning in our heritage. As I'm a racialized person, obviously, and I think names have deep meaning. And I think they're so important. Like uh, our name is like the one thing we're going to hear in a crowd. Like chaos is happening, and we hear Genevieve. Oh my gosh, I hear it. Right? Like we're going to hear our names, and names are just they're everywhere. Um, Brands have names, products have names. You know, companies have names. Like everything has a name. We pay lots of money to wear certain people's names on our luggage and on our clothing and on our shoes, right? So names are like really, really important. And I put these symbols up here for us to look at. The Book of Negroes by Lawrence Hill actually started out as uh, um, it was a story about a girl named Aminata Diallo, and she was um, she was kidnapped from Africa and enslaved in the U.S. And so there's a story that's told about her. And the Book of Negroes is actually an adapted story about this young girl. And I think Lawrence Hill, he wrote, I think it was called Say My Name, and then it was called Someone Knows My Name or something like that. But anyways, it turned into the Book of Negroes, and it's won tons of awards, right? And it talks about this like loss of an erasure of identity, but the reclamation by saying, no, this is actually my name, and this is my heritage, and this is what connects back to. Black Lives Matter, say their names. That's a movement that was started during COVID, and it had to do with like a movement against like police brutality, against Black bodies and killings and so on. And then they started listing all the people that had experienced the same fate as George Floyd. And this is not like a new phenomenon. Yes, it was on tape and it was recorded for the whole world to see, but this is not new. And what we need to do in order to honor these people and these lives that were lost to this tragic trend is we need to say their names, right? Their names are what's important, right? That connects back to who they are and how they are. And so I thought, my goodness, like there's so much that reflects this idea of names being so important in our society. Obviously, I don't know if you guys have heard it, but there's a song by Destiny Child, early 2000s, I think, Say My Name. And it's a popular song. I think it's fun and so on, but I think the message, yes, the message Evangelist Destiny Child, but the message promotes like the importance and the validity of relationship through naming, right? Because the woman is singing, say my name, say my name when no one is around you. So names identify us, they connect us, they speak of personhood and ownership, right? So when I say somebody's name, I call their name, I give them value in my life, right? When someone says my name, they give me value in their lives. I have presence, I have their ear, maybe I have influence in their lives. And it says, oh, Genevieve, I know him or her, I know her, or I can say, so and so, I know him or I know her. And so we talk boldly and proudly about the people that we love and that we're associated with, that we're connected to. And so names are they're indicators of that, right? I remember I was I was in conversation with a man, and he was married. We've had multiple conversations. This guy never said his wife's name, never spoke of his wife. And I just thought, my God, like in my mind, it's such a disrespect. It's such a devaluation. In some ways, it's an insult, really, that you just don't say, like, why? Why? When you don't want to, I feel like we don't say people's names when we don't want to remember them or when we don't want to um, associate with them anymore. You know what I mean? Like, we don't say names. Oh my God, don't say their name. That's like the person they broke up with, or don't say that name. They're still grieving the loss of that person. Don't say their name. We don't want to be associated with them because they're bad for business. You know what I mean? So we cancel that person. So anyway, I think it's important again to recognize how we reinforce this message that names are important in our society, even through our music. And the last picture there is Roots. It's a Roots. You may or may not know the story of Roots, but I think it's perhaps one of the most brave accounts of holding identity and understanding the power of a name. Right, because it was in his refusal to adopt an alternative name. His name was Kunta Kinte, and they said, what is your name? What is your name? They're beating him. And he's answering with his ancestral given name, even as he's being beaten, because his name is like so precious to him. And he's willing to like die to hold on to his name and what it represents. And so I think that just speaks volumes of the importance of names and being able to connect it back to our history and our ancestry. So names, again, there's a beauty in names. They talk about our language, our culture, and identity. Sorry. Um, they talk about who we belong to, where we are from, what we stand for, and how we do life. Right. So our names are an extension of who we are rooted in, right? And even some of us are Christians and we have strong faith. We pray in Jesus' name. That says something. Like we are connected to someone, right? We pray in his name. He has influence and power, right? So our names can do that. They can connect us back to our culture, our language, our identity, and there's strength in that, right? Even I remember, I think pronouncing names is also really important. I remember many times when people would be like, oh, how do you say your last name? Right. And I think that adds to a sense of worth, especially when we don't have names that are English, that are like, colonized names, right? My first name is Genevieve, but I have the rest of my names are African names. And so when people are like, oh, how do you pronounce your name? That's like one of the first things that we use to establish connection, right? When someone says my name, when someone says my name correctly. And so I do my due diligence, when I read books like, Stephen Covey, Dale Carnegie, whatever, they say, remember people's names. That's so basic. It's such a basic thing for creating connection with people, right? Just remember their names. That helps you to build relationship with other people. It's one of the fundamental building blocks and pillars of human identity. So remember people's names, right? It fosters connections, and it promotes like it embraces people. It promotes inclusivity and so on. So I think, yeah, definitely names, when it comes to like who we belong to, it helps us. Sometimes we name drop, right, for clout. Sometimes we name drop for like protection. I know such and such, don't bother me. Or sometimes we name drop for like access. I remember when we were in Ghana, we tried to get a reservation somewhere, and we couldn't get the reservation. They were full, apparently. And then we subsequently met someone else who then called the same place that same evening for the reservation, and they were like, oh yes, absolutely, sir, we have a reservation, we have a table for you. And it was because of his name, right? It was because he has access because of his name. And so we have to sort of look at how names indicate, like strength, power, influence, access, openness, as well, right? And it really can help us to. Oh wow! Oh my goodness! I just realized the time. Sorry, guys. Okay, so those names, yes, absolutely. Culture, identity, who we belong to, yes. Names can also um, uh, um, create barriers to access, or sorry, barriers to power or access to like education and funds, money, finances, and so on. So names can also highlight like a painful history. Sorry, did I see a chat? Ooh, let me see. Remember their names and spell them correctly. Yes, absolutely. That's such a big deal when it comes to like even like our mental and psychological well-being, right? We want our names to be seen and spelled and said correctly. Um, so uh in the past, if you guys will give me 5 extra minutes, I'll make sure to wrap up. But in the past, we look at names and how they were often forced upon a population as a means of like cultural assimilation. So many, 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 many societies have gone through this, but the acceptance of certain names are as a product of like colonization, in some way internally denies our connection back to our history. And so I think it's important to, as we look back, we understand that the names that we've been given have been intentional so that they do erase our cultural significance, so that they do disrupt our relationships, so that they do create unequal connections, and hierarchy in terms of power and political access or policy access to um, education, access to jobs, and so on. Like there are studies that show that if you have an African American sounding name, you are 50% less likely to be called back for a job. There are studies that show like this is researched, right? So names have impact, effect, meaning, and they do result in sometimes not just disconnecting us from our past and threatening our sense of identity and meaning, but also in our current life right now, creating barriers and glass ceilings that hinder us from gaining access to the things that others might. So yes, we have to have names. We have to have uh, a sense of like understanding about our names. And the lie of colonization is that we are only who we are after slavery. And I think that is a grave disservice to us. Okay, so my name is Genevieve. Jenny, I do know the meaning of my name. It means white wave. And I think many of us use our given names, our English names, just because we want to fit in. And so when I was growing up, it wasn't sexy to be African, and so I barely even said I said my last name like an English person, like Aleo. My name's Aleo, uh, so that I could fit in, and so that I could sound like all my other white friends. So to this day, I tell you, like I mean, it's sexy to be African now because Afro beats and everybody popularized and commodified this thing. But when I was growing up, it wasn't like that. So I have really been able to recapture some of my proud African father's instilling values, the values that he instilled in me. Um, and I want to ask you guys if so maybe I'll say this. We did this like naming ceremony thing that I thought was really cool. And they gave me a name. And so it was a very intentional name. And that goes back to like names that were prescribed to us, right? Because they signified some kind of deep purpose or they attached to some kind of profound meaning. They told a story of like where we're from, what we're doing, our parents. And I think, mom, you can answer this, but I'm named after my aunt, my eldest aunt, because that was her middle name. So that was given to me as my first name. Rest in peace. And then my dad chose my other names based on his position within his tribe. And so my first name is Genevieve, very white English name. um, and my middle names are Kafayat Olayinka, and then my Ghana names that they gave me there. Um, I think they're psychologically just interesting, and I think they do definitely mean something and say something about us. So my first middle name is Kafayat, and I wanted to share the meaning of that. The name Kafayat means marvelous, sufficiency, and gratefulness. So the full name, if we say it, Kafaya Tatula, it means God is sufficient for me, or God is enough. And throughout my life, no word of a lie, like I have referred back to God as my strong, firm, consistent foundation. Like he's been the only consistent being in my life. And anything that happens, whether I'm rebelling or I'm angry or I'm disappointed or whatever, like God has literally been my sufficiency. And I just thought it was so interesting that it reflects on the name that I've begun, and that's a Muslim name. And Olayinka is another Yoruba name. Yoruba is the tribe my dad is from, and it means it's a combination of like Ola, which is like wealth, prestige, success, nobility, or like royalty. Um, Majesty. And then Yinka is like around, surrounding. So the whole name Ola Yinka means like wealth, dignity, majesty, whatever, all those things surround me, right? And that is so true. Like every day I go out and I'm just like, wow, I'm surrounded by beauty, by wealth, by excess, by greatness, by nobility in the form of people, in the form of like opportunities, in the form of just like what I see, what I pay attention to, what my mind goes to, how my mind thinks, what like just so many things. And so it's such a reflection of who I actually am. Um, okay, this is man, I wonder if I can play this. Oh, there we go. Okay. I hope you guys can hear that.
Nancy, you were born on Saturday. So you're called Amma. Amma, what? The family's name you have been few.
So this is just a clip of the naming ceremony in Ghana that I thought was so cool. They chose names with intentionality. So Alma is born on a Saturday, and Abrifi means strong and courageous. And so they gave me that name, and they said, "Hey, you live up to this name." This connects back to Miss Yasantua. She was a great figure in Ghanaian culture and in politics and so on. And they said, "Hey, we're giving you this name. Honor this name by living up to the essence of this name." And I was like, my goodness, like how amazing is that to grow up knowing that you have been like you've been named after someone one of greatness and of influence, and they see that in you, right? And you've been called to the privilege and the honor of living up to that. Like anyway, I just thought it was great. And so here's my question to you all as we wind down. What name would you choose? What name would you choose for yourself? When you think of your name, and does it embody who you are? Are you living up to your name meaning? I remember in Zambia, I went to Zambia last year in the summer, and I heard the coolest names. People were named Universe. People were named Everlasting. I was floored. Like just the best names ever. And so think about your name. I know people who have literally changed their names. I have friends my age, younger, older, people within society, they've reclaimed their names. And that's part of decolonization, right? Dr. Umar Johnson, he changed his name. Snoop Dogg, he changed his name to Snoop Lion. I don't know. I mean, but I get it. I get the sentiment there. Malcolm Little, Malcolm X. He said Little is like one of these colonizers' names. I'm not using that name. All right. My name is Malcolm X. Right. You will not erase my identity. You will not erase my heritage, right? And so reclaiming those names and the power that they hold is part of this entire movement. It's part of this identity and meaning building thing, right? To understand our sense of self. And we have to look back to understand where these names have come from, and of course, what these new names mean for us. I just threw these in here just for the sake of connecting it back to our mental health. So mental health strategies for reclaiming identity. So name exploration therapy, again, researching and reflecting on the meanings of your name, cultural connection, right? Engaging in traditions, language, community, storytelling, kind of like this, in spaces like these where we can where we can think about and reflect on and ask ourselves questions about our names and our heritage. Affirmation practice. So using our name with intention, right? Or redefining it or coming up with new names for empowerment. And so I have a friend, he renamed himself. A lot of people who've gone to Ghana, they use now their Ghana name or their African name. Narrative therapy is a big one, right? So rewriting our personal history with a focus on strength and resilience. And then, of course, mindfulness and meditation, which is using our names and our cultural symbols. Oops. And grounding our practices in them. And so that's what we've done here today. These are just some books that I thought might be cool for you guys to take a look at. The Healing Wisdom of Africa, The Power of Names, Uncovering the Mystery of what we are called, and then The Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, which is a really good book by Dr. Joy DeGruy. And here we are. We have come to the end. Our first symbol, season 6, episode 1, Sankofa, the wisdom of learning from the past to build toward the future. I'm going to try this one more time. Se wo rirefe, na wo Sankofa a yentri. It is not wrong to go back for that which we have forgotten or left behind. And so when you introduce yourself, when you think about a name, think about your name meaning, or think about a name that you'd like to be called because it better aligns with your values or embodies what you stand for. Think about Sankofa, right? Think about what we had to leave behind, what was left behind, what we have forgotten, but it's not too late. It's not too late to go back and to retrieve it, to get it, right? And so again, this leads us to how we create avatars and stories and narratives for ourselves that are grounded in deep, profound meaning and identity. And of course, that leads to revolutionary relationships. So thank you guys so much. Thank you for rocking with me, for staying around for this conversation. And next week, we're going to look at race relationships. I don't know. It's going to be Valentine's Day in the Western world, and so we're going to be looking at relationships. We celebrate Black History Month in February, but we also celebrate Valentine's Day, so day for love and maybe heartbreak. But we want to focus on how race plays a role in our love, right? In our expressions of love, whether that's with your friends, whether that's with your parents, whether that's with your colleagues or with your lovers, your spouse. How does the color of your skin factor in? And so we're going to talk about it, right? And do you talk about it? Do you ignore it? Are you afraid of it? Maybe. Um, we have lots of interracial relationships, right? They say in the next 5-10 years, the whole world is going to be like caramel colored. So as a therapist, I get to confront some of these things, these hot topics, head on in sessions with clients, but I want us to have a chance to do that here and create a space for anyone that wants to come in to chat about it, to think about it, to post comments and so on. So we're going to call it race relationships next week. So come on out. As per usual, we're going to be here Thursday at 12 noon. Thank you guys so much for the extra few minutes that you guys gave me. I trust and hope that you guys are going to be able to take something from today, that you will apply it to your lives, share it with somebody, share this platform with others that want to engage in building strong sense of self, gaining better meaning and identity, or gaining stronger identity and meaning for their relationships. And of course, who want to have transformational conversations that lead to revolutionary relationships. I'm your host, Genevieve. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I will see you guys next week. Have an awesome, awesome weekend. The chat. Sorry, I wanna read the chat, but it's not letting me. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Jen. Oh, thank you guys. All right, y'all. Have a good one. Take good care.